we have dumbed down parenthood to diapers and laundry. And so in turn, we have made people feel like that is the less than work. And a lot of the work that we do now is shining a light on, wait a second, parenthood isn't just about sort of the manual labor of like shuffling kids from one place to another. It's about the organization. It's about the time management. It's about the advocacy. It's about the creativity. It's about the self-regulation that has to go into managing siblings. It's about having to know and anticipate children's needs and curate communities and networks around them to scaffold your family. The real woman doing this today is ambitious and creative and growing and trying to sort of stay connected alongside kids. As we start to elevate that perception, I think we give women a sense of camaraderie and a sense of confidence, being able to say, no, I'm doing this really big work of raising my kids right now.
Welcome to Work Unscripted. I'm your host, Marlo Lyons. I'm here to toss aside the corporate scripts for unfiltered truths. We are tackling real work challenges with no sugarcoating, providing you with the strategies to thrive and find fulfillment in your career. It's time to turn the page. It's time to be unscripted. Motherhood looks different today than it has in the past, but has the impact on women's careers changed? My guest today is Neha Ruch, author of the groundbreaking book, The Power Pause, which explores how strategic career breaks can empower rather than hinder our professional lives. I picked up Neha's book expecting practical career advice, and what I found was a powerful redefinition of ambition and success through the lens of motherhood. Neha is here to share her journey from stepping away from a promising career after having children, facing the judgment of society, to discovering a new path filled with creativity, resilience, and purpose. If you're a parent or thinking about becoming one, and you wonder how to balance ambition, career breaks, and professional identity, this conversation is for you. And you know what? If you're a leader of team members who are parents, this conversation might be even more critical for you and your team. Let's get unscripted. Welcome, Neha. I love the title of this book. Tell everybody the title of this book.
Thank you. The book's called The Power Pause, and I really appreciate being here.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so excited to talk to you because I read this book and I love the title simply because the power pause, people talk about the power of the pause, but you have the power pause. There's like a play on words here. And that's where most of the growth happens in people's lives. And that's what happened to you, right? Tell me what made you write this book.
So first of all, let me say you read this book, but you also contributed to it. So I want to thank you. I was lucky enough to be able to have a number of experts lend their wisdom in shaping this book. And I think it really adds a lot to the practicality of it. And I appreciate it so much. The book itself was inspired by my own experience, having, clocked in a really wonderful decade in brand marketing, having gone to Stanford Business School, having checked sort of every box in the book on what success looks like. And then when I had my first child, Bodhi, on New Year's Day of 2016, I wanted more time with him. And it was at the height of the lean in movement, the height of the girl boss era. And so when I downshifted initially, so I shifted into 2 days a week of my role, and I was stunned by the societal pushback that I heard right away. Everything from, are you going to be bored all day? Are you giving up? Why did you bother even going to business school? And meanwhile, I felt really clear that this was not the end of my career. I felt very confident in my career up until date and, the ability to stay connected. And I was meeting so many incredible women like myself who similarly were facing sort of unwelcome commentary on their choice to pause or downshift, but equally had an established career, had a modern relationship with their partner, were tinkering with ideas or freelance or knew that they would transition back eventually, and none of it matched the tropes. And as I started to dig in, I realized, oh, wait a second, we have all this great content about the traditional working parent, but we've left anyone choosing to pause with this idea of the stay-at-home mother from the 1970s. So I started my platform back then as a very tiny blog to reshape the perception.
And your platform is?
My platform is Mother Untitled. And Untitled really in the beginning really spoke to this, seeking and exploring ambition and success outside of our paid titles, but also this idea of the black and white titles of stay-at-home and working mother don't exist anymore. I'm sort of in this vast in-between, and I've come to find a lot of power in that vast in-between.
You said you got a lot of pushback. Did that come just from work or did that come from family? Because I remember having friends when I was much younger, having friends who were a little older than me and they had kids and they decided to stay home. And I was like, what? You're going to give up your career? You worked so hard for it. So even I thought that until I had children. And so where did you get the pushback from?
Everywhere. From peers, from family, not as much from colleagues, actually, interestingly. I think mostly because it's always the people who feel peripherally close enough to you to voice their opinions. And I also think it comes from a place of true concern, right? Like, I don't think it was always malintended. I think, when I'll use my husband, who is such a strong, respecting and respected vet partner, an equal partner in our home. And he was really concerned I was going to be unfulfilled because the only version of me he had met had been striving in the corporate workplace, right? And if we bonded over that, who was I going to be now? And, I had to sort of recognize that I was going to have to go through that journey of figuring out who I was before I could explain it to him. But I could not communicate before getting clear myself that this little brain, this little body in front of me was actually interesting to me. Like learning how he was going to grow, learning how I was going to grow next to him, learning who I could be in this sort of new peaceful version of myself was all interesting work. But it's very hard to convince our culture of that because we've been so wired to derive so much value and so much fulfillment from our paid work. So that was an exercise I had to do for myself before I could really educate other people.
Did you know that you were going to be a stay-at-home mom before you had the baby? Did you have any idea that you were not going to come back from maternity leave?
I did not have that clear view. I did have a clear sense of something wasn't working in my career for me anymore. Something was, because I was already trying to sort of mix things up. There was sort of and I think it's interesting to point to as the average age of parenthood increases in this country, right? Women are having children at the average age of 30, and that skews older on the coast. So you're already having entered parenthood with this sort of accrued amount of experience. And it often comes at an inflection moment of, well, what is work to me right now? And how is my relationship with it changing? And I was already sort of curious about what else existed. I didn't think it was at-home parenthood, but I was clearly at a moment of seeking more meaning. And I often, had talked about business school as this train stop to surround yourself with interesting people and think about what comes next, right? And actually, I think motherhood in that way, I found that again, right? I wanted a train stop to just immerse myself in this new experience and explore a little bit about what might else exist out there for me.
You talked in the book a lot about the unemployment penalty. And I'm curious, were you concerned about the unemployment penalty? Do you think it still exists today as well?
I think there is a penalty to women. I think the gender wage gap is real. But if you actually look at the data, having taken a career break, there's only a 5-cent differential between women who've taken career breaks and women who have not from their male counterparts. So do I think that that data is already old, right? So we aren't accounting for the fact that now 84% of millennials will take a career break. Full stop, right? Whether that be for elder care, mental health, or childcare, right? And so if we're looking at that, we're realizing that those numbers are quickly shifting and there is a way to mitigate the risk. And I felt very confident that I would be able to mitigate the risk. And I think that a lot of writing this book was about sharing that strategic roadmap as to how I did it and how I wanted other women to be able to do that. I think there's a fair amount of confidence derived from education, from your network that you've built, from how I viewed myself as a professional and my accomplishments. Those don't evaporate just because you take a pause, right? And there is a way, and you talk about this too, to nurture those in family life. I think my bigger concern, I think the thing that weighed on me most heavily in those early years was, am I getting counted out of conversations, of the game, right? And I did feel, because of the perceptions of at-home parenthood, I very quickly would sit at a brunch or sit at a breakfast with my kids sort of playing over there with 6 people, all of whom were employed, and no one would ask me a single question about how I spent my time. Because there was just a fundamental lack of understanding that I was still relevant, that I was still interesting, that I was still interested. And so that work to me, that personal work felt more significant.
So there was a loss in being able to connect basically with others in a way that you felt you could connect, but they all of a sudden were it was out of their comfort zone, more or less.
Well, we live in a culture that has put tremendous stock in the question, what do you do? And up until that point, I had a very pithy answer. I run brand at a tech startup, right? As soon as you say that I'm in a leadership brand, it's creative, tech startup, you're sort of ahead of the curve. And everyone has some sort of version of that, right? And for a long time, it represents a lot of what you care about, because naturally in your 20s and early 30s, that does take up a lot of your time, as it should, because it's immensely important, right? In building your skills, building your friendships, building your sense of contribution. And then naturally, as our priorities shift, the way we spend our time shifts. But that question is still centered on what we do for paid work. And so the first time I was asked the question without a very pithy answer, I talk about this in the book, the stay-at-home mother didn't fit for reasons we've talked about, right? It still conjures up very antiquated perceptions. The phrasing of it implies shut in, stagnant in one place. And so it took me a long time to recognize that I could speak to my time in an empowered way with a sense of possibility and a sense of dignity. And I landed on a powerful script that worked, which was, right now, I get to be with my kids. We'll see what comes next. Slowly, I said, right now I get to be with my kids and I'm exploring a project about work and family, right? Leaving a little bit more fluidity and knowing that this was a fluid narrative was so empowering to me, and that took a while to get to. But I think owning that for myself then let me be able to sort of hold my place in conversation in a different way.
And you talk about that. So you break this book into 3 parts. And I think that is super interesting, because the first part is that identity shift. And then the second part is about figuring out what does fulfill you, right? When you're with your children and make room for those family needs. And then the third part of the book is really, how do we evolve as humans being parents, right? And so that first part is that identity shift that you're talking about and how you see yourself. Because a lot of women just say, I'm just a stay-at-home mom, or I'm with the kids all day, or, they almost put it down. And as a parent, oh my gosh, I have so much respect for women who are with their children 24/7. I really do. So what do you say about that piece?
We have dumbed down parenthood to diapers and laundry. And so in turn, we have made people feel like that is the less than work. And a lot of the work that we do now is shining a light on, wait a second, parenthood isn't just about sort of the manual labor of shuffling kids from one place to another. It's about the organization. It's about the time management. It's about the advocacy. It's about the creativity. It's about the self-regulation that has to go into managing siblings. It's about having to know and anticipate children's needs and curate communities and networks around them to scaffold your family. That's the real work of parenthood, right? And I think as we, as a culture, start to talk about those examples, as we start to show, and I think this is a big part of the goal of this, is as we start to bring women out of the shadows and say, the woman at home with an apron baking cookies is from yesteryear and was a fiction then and is a fiction now. The real woman doing this today is ambitious and creative and growing and trying to sort of stay connected alongside kids. As we start to elevate that perception, I think we give women a sense of camaraderie and a sense of confidence, being able to say, no, I'm doing this really big work of raising my kids right now. That's it. And I think that we have, as a culture, assigned so much of definition of ambition and feminism, by the way, to what we do for paid work. And there's a lot of reexamination of that happening right now as we realize, well, ambition can't just be linear, because ambition, by definition, is the determination to do things. We are realistically, as human beings, going to do a lot of different things over the course of our life because we have a lot of different priorities in real life. And how can we recognize that ambition is actually shifting our attention and doing things with care and trusting in the long game and sort of recalibrating over and over? And with feminism, how can we also recognize that everything goes in cycles? And we had to do a lot of work, and I say we liberally, but in the 1970s and beyond, to propel women into the workforce and show our capacity. And now we are realizing, wait a second, the next chapter is, how do we make work actually work for women? Because for so long we were just trying to fit into the workplace. And now we're trying to say, well, we have a realistic view of womanhood and motherhood and other values, and how can we make it work and put more options on the table, pauses included. So I think there's a lot of existing in the messy middle right now, redefining it for ourselves, allowing us to sort of set aside what we thought and just tune into, I'm operating in a new time. I'm going to make the best right choice for our family. And I trust myself and the work I've accomplished to pave a path forward.
So why don't women all take this pause, this power pause? Because it seems like the right thing. Like, it feels good because you're not just sitting around eating bonbons all day, right? You're raising humans. And so why don't more women do this? Why don't they? I know some people get maternity leave, some don't. But I know with my first child, I adopted my children, and my first child, I got 1 month. That's all I got.
I'm so sorry.
And yeah, because I wasn't disabled, right? There's the disability that you get, and I got nothing. And I sat and I used vacation, by the way. I got 2 weeks, and then I added 2 weeks vacation onto that. And that was it. But that was also all we could afford. We basically spent a college education adopting children. So
yeah, I've heard that process. With surrogacy is the same.
Yeah. And so, if you're doing all that, and of course, before the adoption, we did all the IVF. So if you can't afford to take it, I totally understand that, because I've been there, trust me. But why don't other women take the power pause?
There's a number of reasons why women do and women don't, right? And I think what we want is never to say that a pause is the right choice, because it's not the right choice for every family. Because if you look at how our careers impact children, there's a great study I point everyone to. It's Stuart Friedman in Harvard Business Review. Have you read that one? Basically says they've looked at longitudinal data on children, and there is no impact. The greatest impact on children is the presence of a singular caregiver and presence is defined not by hours spent, by the wholeness and the love that they're able to attend to the child's needs when they are physically there, right? And that they know that they're safe and they are secure. And that can be achieved in so many different equations of work and family. So I want to start there. And I also want to say that when I chose to pause my career, I did not choose because I thought it was better for my child. I chose because it was better for me. Like, I chose because I truly wanted that time with him. Not everyone has the exact same experience in early motherhood, and they don't have to. It doesn't make them less than. It made me probably disgruntled with my career at the time. I was operating in a different context. My husband was traveling a ton at the moment in that season of our life. So for a number of reasons, that worked for our family. So we can't evaluate good or bad choice. We just want more choices on the table. From there, we can say that when women choose to pause, it is primarily the number one reason, based on the American Mothers on Pause survey, which is a survey we commissioned with Proof Insights in 2023, 87% say the very valid want to have more time with your kids. Next, less stress in the home. And next, financial considerations, right? Meaning the cost of childcare. So 1 in 3 women actually feel forced to pause right now because of the cost of childcare. So it's not always a choice. For women who don't feel the call to fully pause, they may still want headspace with their child, and they may still want flexible work solutions. They may still want more boundaries around their workday and their time at home, or more childcare or more support. Every mother is still mothering, and every mother still deserves support for whatever choice they are. But I think women may choose not to pause because they can't offset the cost of childcare. Offset the loss of the household income. Right. Or they may really derive a lot of value and wholeness from what they do for work and want to bring that back into their home. And there's no right solution. And candidly, I really see a world where we're actually all ever shifting and actually existing more in between. In the same research, we saw 1 in 3 women working out of the home currently are going to pause their career in the next 2 years. 1 in 2 are going to downshift their working hours. 90% of women at home are going to return to the workforce, meaning we're actually all evolving and ever shifting, and we're sort of all just making the right choice for right now.
Do you think that employers need to listen to that? Because they're calling people back to the office now. And the one thing I found during COVID, not only did everything stop and the world stopped, but I could actually breathe for the first time with very little children, right? And even though they were home all day and I was actually educating them, because the school wasn't up and running, I actually had more time to breathe and be present with them than commuting an hour each way, running between meetings all day, running home, dealing with dinner, picking them up from taekwondo, whatever it was, getting dinner on the table, getting them in the bath or whatever they needed, getting them to bed, and sitting down and doing 3 more hours of work. So I feel like employers have not woken up yet to, you don't just have men in the workforce, you have women in the workforce who are taking the brunt. And don't get me wrong, my husband is a 100% partner, right? So, but I feel like they're now, with this call back to the office and the lack of flexibility and they're not thinking broadly, like they're not innovating on the way we work.
The only thing I can think is that they are using this as a cover up for layoffs. Like, I truly believe that they are trying to make the companies requiring return to work are trying to save money on their P&L, trying to do layoffs without saying they're doing layoffs, because what they are going to see is both men and women, by the way, right? 1 in 5 stay-at-home parents are dads. And I think the men in this generation specifically, I think they're spending 3 times the amount of time with their kids than any generation prior. They want that too. And we've all seen that flexible work not only enhances our productivity, it enhances our job satisfaction. So based on all the data shared, the only logical conclusion I can get to is this is a way for them to cut talent. And then the question is, well, where does that talent go? And I think what's been really interesting to watch is the boom of small to medium business and the valuing that small to medium businesses are doing on fractional talent, on part-time talent, remote talent. So we're going to see a really interesting boom of sort of that sort of sub-economy. I often will tell women returning to the workforce, because, by the way, when women return, the number one criterion they'll put as they stack rank opportunities is flexibility. After that, it's stress level. It's stress level. They want less stress because it's not just about the hours we have with our kids, but it's the headspace. And then after that is salary. Right. And so oftentimes when women are transitioning back to the workforce, I will encourage them to look at small businesses as a way in which to lend their talent in a way that will be valued in a freelance or fractional or part-time capacity, especially as a stepping stone back to full-time work. And so I think and what's wild to see is the boom of women's entrepreneurship, because now what we're seeing is women are starting their businesses and then they're hiring other women because they recognize, A, it's just smart business to have someone working 20 hours. And we all know one woman, a mother's 20 hours is very different than,
Yeah.
someone else with.
Yeah, we're hunkered down, we're getting it done. Yeah, exactly, because we only have so much time.
And perspective and prioritization and time management that we've learned in the home.
So you mentioned earlier about, women go back because they were fulfilled by their jobs, right? And that is the second part of your book, really, is figuring out what fulfillment means for you, both from a family perspective and a work perspective. And if you decide not to return to the workplace, the corporate workplace, let's just say that, you recommend people actually set goals for themselves. Because in corporate, we have goals. And at home, you're saying we should set goals at home. And I know I live and breathe by my planner every day. So I set goals because I'm an entrepreneur. But tell me about these goals and how are they different?
So you're speaking to the second section in the book, which I think is so crucial because we fall into many traps when we, as ambitious women, downshift or pause for at-home parenthood, for more parent time in parenthood. And one of those traps is, well, if no one's giving me a salary bump and a promotion, I'm like lost at sea. Or, well, my new success metric, I guess, is my kids' behavior, which, as you and I both know, is a surefire way to feel like a failure, at least once a month, once a week.
Absolutely.
So that you sort of have to experience that to then realize, wait a second, well, then how can I feel motivated? Because goals, I believe Adam Grant says goals dignify this time in our life. They dignify time. And we want to feel like this time is meaningful to us, not just because of the output of our children, but for ourselves too. And that middle section of the book is, I think, so crucial to the power pause mindset, which is you're not just raising kids, you're raising yourself alongside, right? You're growing too. And so, in the corporate workplace, you do your annual review. You often will go through this exercise of saying, well, these are my benchmarks, and if I hit them, that will be success. And oftentimes we're saying what will please the people around us. At least I did. And, when you have this opportunity to step outside of the workforce, it's actually an opportunity to think, well, what would success really look like if I could have carte blanche? And, there's many exercises in that first chapter of that section, but I encourage people to do one thing if they do nothing else, which is write in great detail what an ideal day looks like in 5 years. What are you spending time on? Who are you spending time with? What does your family feel like? What does your home feel like? What does your mind feel like? How does your body feel? Because it's not that you're going to snap your fingers and be that, but it starts to reveal to you what your most authentic goals are, right? And then you might say, oh, wow, I really envision myself as having healed a lot of my reactivity and my calm and oh, I have a silly household. And, on a professional basis, I'm writing more and I wonder how I can get there in the time available to me. And that's the next part is, okay, then I might assign myself personal, professional can be creative, and family goals. And the piece here is, because I think a lot of parents who are sort of in the thick of it, especially, when you have like toddlers underfoot, thinking, well, where do I find that time? The key is to give yourself small, measurable pieces under that. So if a family goal is, I envision a silly household, that's a value that I want to operate. For me, it was have a dance party every single Monday, because just that one little thing can make me feel like I'm being super intentional about this stage of life. But on a professional level, it may be I'm writing, I'm exploring this like relationship to content that maybe it's write 3 blog posts a week, right? And I'm going to do that during nap time, or this is why not, or night times, or 3 LinkedIn posts because I want to stay ahead of connected to my industry. And from a personal growth perspective, it may be I want to heal that reactivity, and I can do it in small ways. I can't do therapy, but I could listen to a podcast one time a week on women and anger, right? So we're looking at measurable ways to move ourselves forward, and we're coming back to it maybe once a quarter to say, do those still feel in alignment? How do I have more time? The reason this is so crucial is because then we can hold it next to the to-do list as we're planning our day-to-day and say, well, where am I going to find the time to move those forward? And maybe I can let go of some things to optimize my time, not just for my home and for my kids, but really for myself too.
And that really also goes back to your values, because you talked about like what's important to me, how do I want things to feel? That goes back to what's important to you as far as, what do you need for yourself as well? And I think as super moms that we all want to be, I don't think any mom wakes up and says, I want to be a bad mom today. But I think as super moms, we are very hard on ourselves, or maybe we don't even think about asking for help. And I know I didn't ask for help. And so, I think there's something about if you need some time to yourself to accomplish something on your, goal list, that's okay. Right? That's where either your partner comes in, or maybe you get a nanny for a couple hours a day, or you have a parent, or whatever the case may be. The point is, you need to feel like you're contributing enough, right? And you can ask for help if you don't feel like it. It's not all monetary.
I love that you brought up contributing, because that's actually part of that first section is so foundational, is reframing our idea of contribution and reframing our idea of dependence, meaning that so many women are reluctant to get help because we feel like, well, if we've paused our relationship to paid work and we're not bringing in income, we now can't invest in support. That has to start in these very early conversations in planning for a pause in a case of a 2-parent household with your partner, in saying, we are actually both making this decision together because it's going to ultimately reduce the stress in our house or shape the way our home feels and functions for this chapter. That is a benefit to the entire family system. It allows the partner working out of the home and contributing income to single tasks in the workforce, meaning that they are equally dependent on that work that you're doing, the emotional, intellectual, family administration, that level of labor. And once you can do that, then you together are on board with this, a joint household income, and investments into each partner's health and happiness comes out of that joint household income. Now, flash forward to as we're sort of getting our footing in this day-to-day of this chapter, and we're saying, well, where do we look for help? First, we're looking at our partner, right? Because when he finishes or she finishes their work day, you both finished your work day. Now you're both going to, divvy up. And that might not be so straightforward in every home. And it may be about the weekends and how might that partner give you breaks on the weekends. But you together are supporting each other to get your needs met.
That's why it's a conversation, right?
But it has to be a conversation and an ongoing conversation. Obviously, they're not always so straightforward because we're doing a lot of rewiring in this generation. That's why the book includes a number of scripts. And then the next piece is, well, if it if we need more time than our partner is available to give us, then how can we look to other unpaid solutions or paid solutions? And that paid solution, whether it be a mother's helper for 10 hours a week, right? I ended up getting a mother's helper for 1 year. And that was tremendous. I then pivoted into sort of 15 hours of a babysitter the last few years as my kids got older. And that was tremendous. That comes out of the joint household budget. It doesn't come out of my budget. It comes out because it is an investment in the whole family. And I think having it goes back to what is presence. Even if you are at home and you've committed this time to, be with your children, being with your children also includes being healthy and supported and pouring back into whatever those other goals and pursuits are. And I think reframing that sense of value is really important. I think also understanding that no one should work 24/7 without breaks. And sadly, the research shows 1 in 3 at-home parents do, not even family assistants. Wow. Imagine that. I
can't even imagine that.
The family system, right? Like how hard that must be for the family, not just her, right? And so I think it's really crucial that we reevaluate that sense of support.
Well, and I think that kind of brings us to the third part of the book, which is really about how are you going to evolve as a human, right? As a woman, as a mom, as a person. And this pause, yes, it's crazy. It's busy. You're with the kids. You're doing things. You're, keeping the household running, all that stuff. But the pause part is also about pausing, not just from work, but pausing as well to really think about what's important to you. Who do you want to be? How do you want to become a better person yourself? Whatever better means to you, right?
I love that articulation. I think pause isn't the end. it's some space to, and I want to also clarify, it's a career pause. It's not a life pause, right? And so a career pause actually just makes room for exploration on other pieces of our life. And, the myth that haunts women when they step into this chapter is that your network's going to dry up, that your skills are going to evaporate. And in reality, I found that actually my network could expand in directions I couldn't even imagine before, right? Because where before I might have been in my industry, suddenly I was meeting policy advisors and special ed teachers and merchandisers and artists and all in the playground. And people think you're just talking about your cute diaper bag, but the diaper bag actually is like a very quick small talk intro. And then you eventually, after repeat encounters in that playground or on a play space or, in pickup line, you're suddenly going deeper as to what were you working on before? How are you feeling? And this can actually be really interesting networking. We just have to stay open to that. And it's interesting because when women pivot back to the paid workforce, they start with the relationships they've made. So as they're reentering the workforce, women are often turning first to their mom friends. And, mom friends, I think, do two things. One, they validate the experience that you're in. But the other is that they're a sounding board and you trade ideas, you trade interests. And I think that we've dumbed down women, ladies who lunch, right? But those ladies who lunch, by the way, men are on golf courses. Same thing. We're trading resources and ideas and connections, and that's incredibly important.
What I think that people miss is that when you're networking with people, and this is a big deal, you don't want anything from anybody else. You don't need anything. You're not asking for a job. You're not asking for a connection. You're not asking for an invitation. You're just talking. And when you're on the playground having a conversation, those are authentic networking experiences. Whether you call it networking or not, you're building a relationship. And I don't think people realize that when you take this pause, there is so much time to actually build relationships that you otherwise wouldn't have built, like you said, but also build deeper relationships. So when you do perhaps need something in the future, that person's now there for you because they now know you. They like you. You've built a relationship with them. And that could take years in the workplace.
I think that's exactly right, that these relationships are deeper and they're forged in a way that is more whole. So people are seeing your whole self and on what you can contribute. And then they're advocating for you because they know that. And, the next part of this is the sort of creative exploration piece, which I bring that up because there's a woman I interviewed for the book. As you know, the book is strung together with experts like yourself, my own lived experience, but also real women and one of the women, Priscilla Muizan, who lives in Napa, California. And previously she had lived in the Bay Area and she was in tech. And when she moved, she felt quite lost. And she's a self-proclaimed introvert, so she just didn't know necessarily where to start. And so what she started doing was just showing up and being open, not keeping her phone, and finding the super connectors in the spaces she was in. So she talks about one of her son's classes, and she met one of those super connectors and she said yes to a book club. And then at that book club, she got vulnerable, meaning that she said the parts that she was feeling uncomfortable about. And she talked about feeling a bit lost in her career and in the community. And another mother said yes to. They ended up meeting and building this relationship where they would meet every Wednesday for backyard burrito sessions at lunchtime. And they were accountability partners and sounding boards to each other about what they might want to do next. And she credits that time and that exploration with one another about how she was able to find her way back to tech writing. And, part of that was she had never thought of herself as a writer. But when she really thought about, well, what lights me up? When she gave herself space to think, when I spend time on different activities, where do I feel the most interested? If I could do anything, what would it be? What do I find myself volunteering to do? And in asking herself those questions and having a sounding board to do that, in that format, she found her way into this new endeavor. And so much of this period, I think, is allowing ourselves to explore, not necessarily with a through line to I'm going to be returning to work, this is my stepping stone to doing it, but to giving ourselves a little bit of room to self-study, to explore a lot of different things and then double click on the things that feel more interesting. And then take the next step to pursue that, and then see how it sort of all rounds together into a new interest or a passion.
And that's what I do with my clients, quite frankly, because I ask them all the time, well, what do you want to do? And they tell me what they can do, as opposed to what they want to do, right? And so taking that time to figure out what lights you on fire, like what you said, is super important before jumping into what can I do next? What can I do next? Because then you might go back to school while you're, not in the commercial workforce, and you go back for the wrong thing. Or you go take some courses, but they are not really as relevant to the thing that really lights you on fire. So you have to take that pause, like you said, this power pause, not only from the commercial workforce, but also from your career and your thinking about what's next. But let me go back for a second, though. I think you also, though, at the same time, if you take the time to figure out what you light you on fire and what you're really interested in and what you want to do, you should potentially, and I hate the word should because I don't want to put any pressure on anybody, but really think about what skills do I maybe need to learn during this time, or should I take a course, or is there something that I'm volunteering at that's relevant? Like, there are things you can do when you're on this power pause that can set you up, maybe not this roadmap, but set you up for re-entering the workforce at some point if you want to.
Well, I love that juncture, because I think what you're speaking about is, once you've had some time to explore, you might be feeling that nudge that you're ready to go return to paid work, and I encourage women, and I'm sure you do the same, which is to say, take time. Like, it's not going to be overnight. If you have the ability to take time, take it, because you've taken this pause and you don't want to do it a disservice by now tripping and falling into an environment that may not suit you. So if you can, start that process about a year out. Where do you start? We go back to the friends you built, right? You may start with coffees just to start to, like Priscilla did, start sounding out her different interests. And the other piece is doing some reflection on what part of my role previously did I love? Do I want to return to it? How might I then, if I want to return to it, beef up that experience? And I think that's what you're talking about, right? Which is, do I want to do volunteering experiences? Do I want to advise friends or families, businesses, even in an unpaid capacity, just to build those career talking points, right? Because they all help shape what you are doing during this experience, and gives you confidence when you're walking back in. If you are saying, I want to pivot, then you may say, well, what about my previous experience lens? And then where are what is the space between what I was doing previously and what I want to do now? And how might I build towards that by taking some non-traditional experiences? I've had friends intern, at 42 years old. And I love that, because you're learning on the job. And oftentimes they'll say, well, don't work for free. Well, here's the thing. It's don't work for no value. And if there's a value exchange, if you're getting experience and you need that experience, that's great. And I think the same applies to volunteering, which can get a bad rap, right? So much immense skills are gained in volunteering. So many networking, relationships are nurtured, and so many career sabbatical story points are actually included there.
Yeah, I always tell people, it doesn't matter whether you were paid. It still goes on your resume. It doesn't matter. It's the experience and the skills that you gained. Let's back up for 1 second. You used the word confidence a few seconds ago, and I think this is super important because I work with a lot of moms, and it has nothing to do with what's on their resume or what their interview skills are. It has to do with the confidence that they can do it. So building that confidence back is super important, right, during this pause.
Confidence often comes from practice, and sometimes comes from holding both things, holding that I can feel uncomfortable because this is new and feels different, and I am practicing my story. I am practicing, you're building up experiences. And that's why I encourage women not to go from 0 to 60, but to consider a freelance opportunity, consider advising the friend for free, consider volunteering at this school. You're building your confidence in those experiences through practice. You're then practicing your story, whether it be in working with a coach, like in a trained professional like yourself, Marlo. I can't recommend enough working with whether it be a confidence coach or a career coach or an advisor or a mentor, just to help shape your story, because oftentimes it helps having someone who can piece it together and give you the language. I offered in the book, of course, because I think words are important. Owning your story is important. But I think confidence is gained through the practice, through moving past the discomfort and starting to put one foot in front of another and building little experiences that build to big experiences, as well as running through the story over and over. The reason I talk about that script for how do you answer what do you do, going back to the beginning, is because practicing that helped me walk through those rooms and that stage of life with more confidence. It didn't just appear, it was practiced.
And I think that, when you are going back into the workforce, you want to be able to present yourself confidently that you made this deliberate choice to take a power pause. And that's fine, because if you're confident in what you did, just like somebody who decides to take time off to travel the world, it's the same thing. You've made a deliberate choice for your own professional and personal development to take time off from the commercial workforce, right? You're not actually off, but how you present that and the more confident you are is more important than what you actually say, believe it or not. It really is, because if you're embarrassed by it, they're going to be like, oh, but if you're confident about it, it just becomes a non-issue. It really does.
It's amazing to me. The research does show that employers much prefer to see clarity on why you took a break from the traditional workforce, as opposed to trying to bury it. Now, there's sort of mixed takes on that, because if you have been consulting for 20 hours a week, there's no reason to write career sabbatical for family life. Feel free to talk about your part-time work. You were employed. And I think, you have to sort of weigh how you want to shape your story. If you have been freelancing and participating in the workforce in any capacity and you want to focus on that, then that's powerful too. I think that there's sort of two options that are very unique. I think that if you have been mostly in motherhood and have assembled these non-traditional experiences under your career sabbatical for family life, being able to own that gives you actually a little bit more confidence, because you can speak to it authentically instead of putting lipstick on a pig, which everyone can see.
Exactly. Okay, what did we miss? What did we miss? Anything that we haven't covered? Because this book is so comprehensive.
Thank you.
But I feel like we covered a ton. What did we miss? What's the one piece of advice maybe you would give to moms out there who are thinking about taking this power pause? They are able to do so, but they're scared. Or moms who are maybe taking the power pause now and thinking of coming back to work. What's your one piece of advice for each?
I think the phrase right now has been so powerful for me, because you're not making a forever and permanent and finite choice. You're making a choice for right now. You're embracing what that allows for you. You're accepting what isn't for right now. And you trust that it's a long game and you can recalibrate over and over again. Okay. It's great information. I love this book. And by the way, I know this is for moms, but I felt like this book could be for dads too. You said 1 out of 5 dads, right? It is a stay at home dad. I feel like this book could be for anybody, because it really wasn't just written for moms. I feel personally, that's what I felt. So anyway, the book is called The Power Pause: How to Plan a Career Break After Kids and Come Back Stronger Than Ever. Where can it be found? You can get it wherever books are sold, and you can follow Mother Untitled on Instagram for reframes on this dialogue daily, and subscribe to the newsletter on motheruntitled.com. Thank you so much, Neha. This was absolutely so inspiring, and I hope more moms will do what feels authentic to them. Thank you, Marlo, for all you do. Work Unscripted is produced and edited in partnership with the team at Palm Tree Podco and 21 Digby. The content for this week's episode was created by me, Marlo Lyons.